After having a disappointing experience with the Callisto Protocol, I figured it was time for me to revisit another game that I criticized very harshly, and that is The Evil Within. The Evil Within is a horror game created by a studio called Tango Gameworks, published by Bethesda, and directed by the legendary Resident Evil creator himself, Shinji Mikami. In the late 2000s and early 2010s, the survival horror genre started to fall under the radar when it comes to the AAA mainstream, and the genre was changed forever when Amnesia: The Dark Descent was released in 2010. The game was incredibly successful due to its horrific atmosphere, basic gameplay, and no ability to fight back. Having no sort of combat helped the game become the scariest video game of its time, and it became a huge inspiration for a lot of other games like Outlast, Five Nights at Freddy's, Slender, SCP Containment Breach, and more. Outlast is the one that inspired me to get into horror games in general, and I have a lot of great memories with that game. However, ever since I played Resident Evil Remake in 2016, I have grown to be invested in horror games with a combat feature more, because I can have different experiences when replaying these games, like having new weapons, facing the enemies in a different difficulty, and playing on new game plus modes. With hide and seek horror games, it's basically the same every time you boot those games. Just hide from the monster and then reach your objective. For me, this gives me less of a reason to actually replay those games, and I just immediately move on to something else. The Evil Within was marketed to be a return to form for survival horror. It was released in 2014, but I never got around to play through it entirely, because the game suffered from performance issues, mainly just frame drops on my PS4. I only touched the game on the PS4 console, so I can't really say anything about the PC or Xbox ports. Maybe it runs better on PC, but you have to let me know in the comments. It wasn't until I bought my PS5 on April 2022, which helped the game run better with a stable 30 frames per second. It's not perfect, but it was enough for me to experience the game as a whole. I have to be honest with all of you. When I finished this game for the first time in 2022, my impressions were very negative. I despised this game.
What?
I thought it was the most excruciating horror game that I've ever played, because the gameplay was so janky, the story was all over the place, the characters were just whatever, and the main story just took too long to finish. I am aware that this is such an unpopular opinion because people do love this game, and I'm fine with that. Not everyone is gonna like what you like, that's just the way it is. However, I have some good news that I want to share with all of you. After having such an unpleasant experience with the Callisto Protocol, which I did do a review on the channel, link in the description, I figured it was time to revisit The Evil Within, and I did replay it twice just recently. I was hoping that my opinion of it would change, because compared to Callisto, this game actually has a variety of enemies, bosses, and combat elements. And what do I think about the game just now? Let's talk about it. First, let's discuss the gameplay. The Evil Within is a third-person shooter game where you have to manage your resources against your enemies very carefully. Just a small warning, do not go into this game expecting to be Doomguy or Leon S. Kennedy from Resident Evil 4, because even if you manage to get enough ammo to take out one enemy, you can still screw up. How exactly? Well, the gun accuracy really means business in this game. You have to make sure you aim correctly at whatever you wanna shoot. Just because you have the cursor near a guy's head doesn't mean you are good to go. I would advise you to have the aim right in the center of the head in order to take a headshot. Otherwise, you will just make yourself look like an idiot. You can say that this gunplay can be janky at times, and that's one of the reasons why I hated the game in the first place. But after like 2 more playthroughs, it started to grow on me. I can still miss from time to time, but I think the jankiness was done on purpose to make me feel like I was trying to survive, but that is just an assumption. Nonetheless, the gunplay in this game is very divisive. While I did get the hang of it, I understand why other people don't like it. I think this is one of the games where the New Game Plus mode is much better way to experience the whole campaign than the normal game mode, because the game is more balanced that way. There is this awesome mechanic that I just love, which is burning bodies with matches. This is such a very useful mechanic that makes the experience more satisfying. When an enemy is down, you can use a match to burn it down, killing it instantly without the need of wasting ammo. It's just like the one from Resident Evil Remake, but it is much easier to use it here because it doesn't require you to use gasoline or kerosene. You can even use it against enemies who are standing up. Just make sure you stand near a dead body and have the enemy nearby to light it up. Even better, when a group of enemies are all together on the ground, you can light them all up with just one match. It helps a lot when you are low on ammo. These guys are no match for me. Get it?
You've got terrible taste.
I'm sorry.
Throughout this game, you get to possess various weapons like a revolver, a shotgun, a sniper rifle, and a crossbow with different types of bolts. And during your journey, you collect these green gels that you use in this chair machine to upgrade your weapons and stats. Every time I collect these gels on the ground, it gives me such a satisfying feel, like I am going to become a bigger monster than the monsters that I encounter. I need to bring this up. The default running speed is extremely low, and Sebastian is getting very tired after like 3 seconds. You are forced to upgrade your stamina through the machine if you want to sprint faster. What the hell is the excuse for this bullshit? You don't need to be athletic for you to sprint more than 3 seconds. Any normal person can do that. Sebastian is a detective, yet he runs slower than my niece. This isn't challenging, this is terrible game design. A wooden leg or being a smoker is no excuse, because even in the DLCs, Kidman has the exact same default running speed, and she was never injured or anything.
What the fuck is this bullshit?
The Evil Within, for the most part, does go for a linear approach, which is a good thing in my opinion. But at the same time, there are some level decisions that completely ruin the experience for me. Let's talk positive first, shall we? Some of my favorite levels in this game are the village, the medieval ruins, the underground dungeon, and the funhouse, to name a few. The village is just like the one from Resident Evil 4, but instead of having all the villagers raging towards you, you can roam around this place for free to explore different houses and scavenge for supplies while approaching some patrolling enemies. It is amazing because exploration is one of the most important elements in the survival horror genre. I want to feel like I need things before going forward to protect myself from danger, and this level did just that. The medieval ruins is also a great level, and it has the same reasons why I love the village setting. Well, for the most part, because I fucking hate the hold your position part, and this mutant dog boss that staggers me every time he charges at me. I also love the underground dungeon, not just because of the exploration, but also because of its incredible boss fight that is extremely spooky and perfectly balanced. We'll talk about it later. Last but not least, the funhouse, where you approach a lot of traps. While there are some parts that I do not appreciate, I can still have the sense of immersion through it, due to its atmosphere alone. And I love having enemies killed by this giant blade. With all that being said, let's talk negative this time. There are 2 levels in this game that frustrated the hell out of me, the Victoriano Mansion and the Destructed Crimson City. I was really excited to explore the mansion because Resident Evil 1 Remake, another game by Shinji Mikami, is my favorite horror game of all time. And the setting of that game, the Spencer Mansion, is one of the most iconic locations in horror games. I love the Spencer Mansion so much for its atmosphere and the sense of loneliness, and I thought the Victoriano Mansion was going to give me the same vibes. Unfortunately, that was not the case, because the whole experience was ruined by the implementation of a stalker enemy that would appear out of nowhere at times to chase me throughout the whole place and kill my face instantly if they get close to me. They can also happen to dick with me by telepathy right in front of my face, giving me almost no time to react and run back. You can't even kill or stagger them with your weapons, and you have to avoid him until he decides to vanish. What the fuck, Shinji? How could you do something like this? Because of this feature, I don't have any time to appreciate the environment of this mansion. I rush towards my destination, and I go back to the same room more than twice, so I don't have to lose all the progress because of this bullshit. Who the hell asked for an Outlast Stalker set piece in this type of explorable location? It's not even as balanced as Mr. X in Resident Evil 2 or the Xenomorph from Alien Isolation.
How do you fuck that up?
The Destructed Crimson City is the most criticized level of the entire game, and it's not hard to see why, because the horror is just lost completely in this entire chapter. the game all of a sudden decides to go for a fast-paced action route. You encounter enemies with guns, you participate in this obligatory hold your position segment, you fight a giant boss creature on a road chase, and you shoot zombies with a freaking turret. Again, what the fuck? This whole level made me feel like I was playing Resident Evil 6, but without having myself laughing at ridiculous moments. Like this one, for instance. Didn't Shinji Mikami say he wasn't happy with the direction that Resident Evil was going at that time? It doesn't make any sense considering that throughout chapter 13, you encounter these sliding disc blades in some kitchen. And guess what? This type of obstacle is in RE6 as well. Wasn't The Evil Within meant to be the actual opposite of that game? Out of all the things that RE6 did actually right, this is what they decided to go for? We'll talk more about this later in the video. As far as the enemies go, I wouldn't say they are completely unique, but they are decent enough for what this game has to offer. You encounter these zombie-like creatures. They are like a combination between a zombie and a Ganondorf from Resident Evil 4, and some of them have wires strapped around their bodies. Later in the game, you approach these mutant enemies that can spit at you. Wait a minute, why does this creature look familiar? Oh lord, please don't remind me. Get out of my head. Get out of my head! Get out of my head! As mentioned, you also face some enemies who possess guns, which I am not a fan of. They were acceptable in a few chapters, but in this one, just fuck the hell off. Then there is this hooded guy sharing the same likeness as the main villain of the game, and he has an ability to have bloody arms coming towards me for an instant kill, but he is not too hard to take on. Overall, the enemy variety in The Evil Within is okay. Nothing really special about them, but fun to kill nonetheless. I also shouldn't forget to mention the bosses in this game. Some are memorable for how cool it is to fight them. Like this Spider-Woman named Laura, who has arms with claws all over her body. She will kill you instantly if you let her near you, and the way she moves is just very unsettling. The only way for you to deal with her is to set her on fire, or just let the story do it for you. Then there is this box-head butcher named the Keeper, who's like a nod to Pyramid Head from Silent Hill 2, and I think this is the best boss in the game. He's very balanced, I like the design of it, and I just love how he has multiple safe boxes lying around for him to resurrect into one another. It makes my skin crawl. Ugh. He appears a few times throughout the game and even as a regular enemy, but I wouldn't recommend fighting it at this part, because he would just walk away if you go stealth, or just kill him to get more green gel. Throughout this game, you will face this one particular boss a lot, and that is this chainsaw guy who acts almost the same as Dr. Salvador from RE4. He serves as your first enemy in the beginning chapter, and you have to avoid him by hiding and running away, if you can call this running. Then later in the game, he becomes your boss in very different chapters, but he quickly became my bitch after the first chapter. One boss that I think gets overlooked a lot is this giant mutant creature that you fight in this parking lot. This is the one that I think has the most unique design among all the bosses in the game. Another cool but kind of forgettable boss fight is this squid monster. I remember having fun with this boss the first time I faced it, but it became quite easy in New Game Plus mode. Last but not least, there is this one boss fight that I actually despised. And it's this mutant dog thing. As I said before, this dog does whatever it takes to make me miss my shots and charges at me to stagger my ass. This boss is fucking terrible. With the gameplay out of the way, let's talk about the story. I don't think I'm going to describe the plot in a chronological order because the story is all over the place, and I won't be able to make it make sense in every single detail. Also, spoiler alert. First, let's talk about the cast of this game. The main protagonist of this game is a detective from Crimson City Police Department named Sebastian Castellanos, played by Anson Mount, and he really doesn't have much going for when it comes to his character development. He doesn't have much personality, and his backstory is reduced to these notebooks that you pick up throughout the game. What you learn from these books is that he married a woman named Myra, and they both had a child named Lily, who tragically died in a house fire at just 5 years old. As I said, you learn these details through textbooks, but they are not brought up to the story at all, and they don't do anything to affect the character growth for Sebastian in this game. It seems like these notebooks were a last minute idea, and you can't even miss them because it is required for you to pick them up in order to reach the safe room. The second main character is Julie Kidman, played by Jennifer Carpenter, and she is the rookie cop of KCPD. She doesn't really appear or do much in this entire game, but she does have some interesting secrets and decisions that made me not want to trust her. More on that later. The third final main character is Joseph Boda, Sebastian's old partner, and just like him, he doesn't have much to offer in terms of characterization. I will say though, I think he has the most charisma out of all the characters in the game, and I like his decent chemistry with Sebastian. It helps the fact that Joseph was played by Yuri Lowenthal, and I don't need to explain why. Can't wait to see his performance again in Spider-Man 2. The Evil Within starts with the main characters being transported in a cruiser towards the Beacon Mental Hospital, where there was a report of a crime happening in that building. Sebastian and Joseph go inside, they approach bodies everywhere on the floor, and they find one person alive, Dr. Marcello, played by Daniel Riordan. Sebastian looks through the security monitors and he sees some cops shooting at some kind of a force figure. This inhuman thing looks at the camera, he teleports behind Sebastian and knocks him out. Seb wakes up in the hospital basement hanging upside down with a butcher just butchering stuff. Sebastian sneaks past him, but he triggers an alarm and he has to run away from him. He gets a cut on his right leg, and for some reason, his wound never gets infected despite going through a bloodbath and never getting some medical attention. He manages to escape from this chainsaw fella, the hospital starts falling apart, and all of a sudden, Seb starts spitting like hell despite having a wounded leg. He gets outside and all hell is breaking loose. He sees his police driver driving an ambulance with Kidman, the doctor, and his patient Leslie, played by Aaron Landon. One question. Did anyone actually think Leslie was a boy at the start? He has the look of a girl, he sounds like a girl for the most part, and he has a girl's name. I can't tell if that was done on purpose or the character designer just didn't do his research. No problems here, just wanted to point that out. I also need to say that Leslie is just a typical crazy guy from a mental hospital with no real character development, and he's just there to be a plot device. The only thing I remember the most about him is this scene.
Losing our minds, losing our minds, losing our minds.
I'm sorry, but I can't help but think of this scene from Battlefield Earth.
We've decided to keep you here for another 50 cycles. With endless options for renewal. With endless options for renewal. With endless options for renewal.
Anyway, Sebastian gets in the ambulance and we get a montage of escaping from city destruction. I really can't help but think of this scene from the movie 2012. The driver gets infected with some strange disease and the ambulance falls off the cliff. Man, this must be one of the best openings for a horror game ever. And it's no secret that it got everybody excited for what happens next. Unfortunately, this is where the story gets more complicated. And I really can't talk about it without mentioning all the plot twists. So, bigger spoiler alerts! The entire story of the game takes place in a machine called STEM, and it works the same as the one from the Matrix movie franchise. Only this time, you are connected to someone's brain and you are dragged into a world created by that brain. The game wants to make you feel like a detective to collect all the clues and details to solve the mystery of why certain things happen. The main villain, or should I say the real main character of this game, is Ruben Victoriano, aka Ruvik. The reason why I call him the main character of The Evil Within is because the whole game focuses on his backstory, and he's behind everything that happens. The brain that the STEM machine is connected to is Ruvik's, and all our heroes are dragged into the world created by his mind. That's why you suddenly end up in different places like a village, a dungeon, the city, the underground, etc. He has control over the STEM machine, and he has god powers. He can teleport, he can kill you instantly, and he created those monsters. To summarize his backstory shortly, a young Ruvik played with his sister Laura in a barn, they have great chemistry, and their happy lives have come to an end when a group of farmers burned the barn down to the ground to get revenge on Ruben's family for buying their property. They succeed in doing it, causing Laura to burn alive and Ruvik barely making out alive. Ruvik considered building the STEM machine for some scientific reasons, but his work was later taken over by a corporation called Mobius. They use his brain as the core of the STEM machine, and his objective is to find the right host for him to possess in the real world. In the end, Leslie is confirmed to be the key for Ruvik to enter the real world. Ruvik is easily the best character of the game, and what makes him even better than the main characters is that he is played by Jackie Earle Haley, who is famously known for playing Rorschach in Zack Snyder's Watchmen. Every time he appeared on the screen, I had a smile on my face. Well, except for his stalker appearances in Chapter 9. Just fuck this part in particular. One thing I really don't like about him is that he lacks the motivation of keeping Sebastian alive. Why doesn't Ruvik just kill Sebastian? He has god powers and has no sort of connection with Sebastian in any way, shape or form. Seb is just a guy that came in the wrong place at the wrong time. Ruvik had no problem killing these cops at the beginning of the game. So what makes Seb, Joseph and Kidman any different than these guys, other than being the main characters? By the end of the game, you have a boss fight with Ruvik, and it is very disappointing because it is filled with quick time events, shooting with a turret, blowing him out with limited rockets, and having a slow-mo one last shot. Sebastian defeats Ruvik, he gets out of the Dream World STEM machine, and destroys Ruvik's brain. Kidman is revealed to be an agent of the Mobius, she brings Sebastian back to the real world, and she and her crew leave the building. Sebastian wakes up, Leslie's body isn't on his tub, Seb goes back to the main entrance of the Beacon Hospital, he sees Leslie just walking away, and in the next seconds, he disappears. This just means that Ruvik escaped, he's possessing Leslie's body, and he just walks away. The game ends with Sebastian just being all alone, the camera zooms out of this hospital, and we get one of the weirdest choices of a song for credits rolling in a horror game.
It's the biggest piece of dog shit.
Even with the main story over, the game did receive additional content, consisting of 2 story DLCs that feature Kidman as the main protagonist, and you play in her perspective through the main story of The Evil Within. As I mentioned before, she has very small screen time in the main game, and through the DLCs, you come across a lot of interesting moments, like having the administrator of Mobius as the main antagonist, protecting Leslie from Ruvik, and dealing with this lamp-haired creature called Shade. She's fucking terrifying. The DLCs aren't as fun as the main game in my opinion, but I will say this, they are much scarier to play through. Considering that you are playing hide and seek with certain enemies, and you will only get your weapons at the very end of the Consequence DLC. They are decent enough. I haven't touched the Executioner DLC yet, but all I heard and seen is that you play as the Keeper, and all you do is just going on a killing spree with different enemies. So yeah, no story to tell. Anyways, that was The Evil Within, and... As I said before, I used to hate this game when I played it for the first time last year, because I was not a fan of the janky gameplay even by 2014 standards, the main characters were lacking personality, and there are so many levels that don't really serve any purpose other than padding the game. Now that I replayed this game and the sequel just recently, let's talk about what I liked and disliked about The Evil Within. So in a positive perspective, this game has such an incredible atmosphere, and it does a great job at building suspense in certain moments. The gunplay is so much fun once you get the hang of it, but what I love the most about the gameplay is just burning bodies with matches, especially if I manage to burn a whole group with only one match. There is one level where you are in a hospital floor and you are facing off invisible enemies. The only way for you to spot them is the use of your surroundings and environment, which is something that I want to see more in survival horror games. My final pro on this game is that I love the bosses in this game. Although I wouldn't say they have the most unique look, but I do enjoy fighting them nonetheless. As far as the negativity goes, let's talk about the biggest problem with The Evil Within as a whole. This game suffers from an identity crisis because the game doesn't really do anything original or unique to create its own identity, and it relies too much on ideas that we have already seen before in other relevant horror properties. It's like, I get it Shinji, you made Resident Evil 1. I get it Shinji, you made Resident Evil 4. I get it Shinji, you love Silent Hill 2. I get it Shinji, you love Silent Hill 4, I think. I get it Shinji, you loved Amnesia, maybe. I get it Shinji, you loved The Shining. Can you stop winking at us? I mean, let's take a look at the identity of these iconic horror game franchises, shall we? Resident Evil. It's about sci-fi bioterror outbreaks in different places on Earth. Silent Hill. It's about a psychological thrilling adventure. Fatal Frame. It's about paranormal shenanigans where you deal with ghosts. Dead Space. It's about sci-fi body horror in outer space. So what kind of an identity does Evil Within have exactly? Is it a psychological game? Is it an action game? Is it a zombie game? Or does it want to be all of it? There is no logical answer to this if I'm being honest. The only one that makes sense the most is being an homage payer to other horror games, but it doesn't save the game from that problem. I already said this before, but I'm gonna say it again. Another big problem about The Evil Within is that there are chapters and levels of the game that don't really serve any purpose other than either creeping me out or padding the game. Like, why the hell did we need this sub-level where we get medicine for Joseph, who got shot in his body? This only takes 10 minutes to go through. We get a toilet section that nobody asked for, Joseph gets recovered very quickly, and he doesn't survive by the end of the game anyway. Speaking of which, this cutscene is the very last time we see him in the story. He gets accidentally shot by Kidman, and that's it. We never see Joseph again after this scene. There are also some creatures that have no relevance to the story whatsoever. These little creepy crawlies. Did anyone actually face a challenge with these little bastards? What was the point of them exactly? They only appear in chapter 8, which is a short chapter by the way. It only takes like 30 minutes to complete. It doesn't really do anything for the plot, besides the last cutscene, where the doctor gives us some exposition. This scene should just be in the last cutscene for chapter 7. And finally, the reason why we approached this boss fight twice is because Joseph dropped his glasses.
I dropped my glasses back there. I'm sorry. It's not just about being unable to see. It's about feeling normal.
Who does he think he is? Velma from Scooby-Doo?
Jeez, Joseph, all that for a pair of glasses.
Exactly! Some of my old thoughts on the game still stand, like characters having no personality that makes them anywhere memorable, especially Sebastian, because he acts more like a Dark Souls protagonist with a voice addition than an actual human being. Also, the gameplay is still janky in some occasions, and if you can't handle such controls, then this game might not be for you. Overall, The Evil Within is just fine. I don't love this game, I don't hate it either, but I did manage to have fun with it. I do admit I was kinda wrong about it when I played it back in 2022, but I still don't consider it one of the best in the genre, at least not top 5. If you want to get into survival horror, I don't recommend this game as your debut to the genre, because you'll probably end up having a negative opinion about it. Probably. Alright, I think I said everything that I needed to say, so let's go to my verdict. So if you are a fan of the survival horror genre and you are okay with the gameplay being janky and extremely punishing, this game could be for you. However, if you expect this game to be something different compared to other horror games you played and have an experience with a fair challenge, you will probably end up hating this game. So I suggest you take a safe route, save your money, and buy this game when it drops on sale. Thank you guys so much for watching my review on The Evil Within. I'm really glad that I managed to make 2 reviews in the same month without feeling any loss of mood, and I hope I can keep it that way because I love talking about horror games. If you want to see me do more reviews for other horror games, and you have some suggestions, please consider liking the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel for more. Hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next video. Farewell.